So, hallo und herzlich willkommen. Ich hoffe, die Technik läuft. Wir haben heute einen Gast da, Nick Little.
Hallo.
Einer der 3 Designer von Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition heißt es. Genau. Und der wird uns jetzt gleich das Spiel ein bisschen vorstellen. Via Tabletop-Simulator werden wir da mal reingucken. Und ja, wenn ihr auch Fragen habt, könnt ihr natürlich gerne jederzeit fragen zwischendurch. Ich höre mich nur gerade doppelt. So, jetzt ist besser. Genau, wir haben das Spiel hier auch schon mal aufgebaut per Tabletop-Simulator. Ich glaube, Karl hat noch 1, 2 Fragen vorbereitet. Wir werden das meiste auf Englisch machen, damit wir auch verstanden werden von Nick. Und wenn ihr aber irgendwie Fragen habt oder so, werden wir die übersetzen. Wenn ihr irgendwas nicht versteht, könnt ihr auch kurz Bescheid sagen. And now I think we'll talk in English, so everybody can understand us.
Yes, so as I already explained, we will talk in English and I will give short translations into German. So, also wir werden hauptsächlich eben auf Englisch reden. Zwischendurch, wenn es zum Beispiel Fragen gibt, stellen wir die eben zuerst auf Deutsch, dann übersetze ich das Ganze auf Englisch oder Ben und die englische Antwort geben wir dann auch kurz wieder. Ich bin mal gespannt, wie gut das funktioniert. Aber ich würde dann an der Stelle vorschlagen, dass Nick sich ganz kurz ein bisschen vorstellt, damit ihr auch wisst, mit wem ihr es zu tun habt. So, Nick, I just told the audience that if you can, tell us a bit about yourself, what you've done before, and how you probably got to this project.
Sure. So my name is Nick Little. I am the I'm the vice president of development and production for Indie Game Studios. Indie Game Studios houses Stronghold games and indie boards and cards. I got into the industry 7 years ago through starting a company that had a couple successful Kickstarters that was eventually, we were acquired by Indie Boards and Cards. And so I've been part of this family for the past 5 years or so. I have designed a couple of games, initially with that first company. And then since then, I've been the lead developer / co-designer for all the Aeon's End games, if you're familiar with that deck building co-op series. I did the Buffy Legendary. I don't know if Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a big thing in Germany or not, but I did that Legendary. Okay, awesome.
It was.
I did that Legendary from Upper Deck. I have a handful of other smaller design creds or development. I'm predominantly a developer, but on this one we did a co-design with Sydney Engelstein and Jacob Frixilius. So how we came about to this project is we had heard several people wanting a shorter version of Terraforming Mars at like a smaller price point, and we kind of went in with that sort of design tenet of how do we make Terraforming Mars so that it's like mostly cards, and so that you get the experience that is Terraforming Mars, but on a smaller time frame.
Ja, thank you. Also, Nick Little ist vor 7 Jahren in die Industrie gekommen, hat ein eigenes Label gegründet, das dann später aufgegangen ist in Indie Game Studios, wo unter anderem Indie Boards and Games dazugehört. Unter dem Label erscheint, meine ich, auch Aeon's End tatsächlich. Ihr kennt ihn, er war beteiligt an der Entwicklung von Aeon's End und den anderen Produkten, die dazugehören. Aeon's End Legacy ist da unter anderem als Designer geführt. Die etwas älteren Semester unter euch erinnern sich vielleicht noch an Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Und da gibt es ja auch ein ganz gut bewertetes Spiel tatsächlich. Legendary. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Auch da war er zum Beispiel daran beteiligt, sowie noch an einer Reihe von anderen Spielen. Path of Light und Shadow fällt mir dabei noch ein. Genau, und er ist dazu gekommen, viele Leute haben sich gewünscht, ein Terraforming Mars, das ein bisschen zügiger geht, in das man auch schneller reinkommt, das auch schneller auf den Tisch gebracht ist, eben zu haben. Und das ist eben auch das Design Goal, das Ziel beim Design gewesen, genau diese Punkte unterzubringen, ohne aber das Spielgefühl von Terraforming Mars dabei zu verlieren, sondern diese Essenz einzufangen. Funnily enough, the 2 games I wrote down that you made, or where you were in the development process, were Aeon's End and Legendary Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, Wir werden jetzt direkt, glaube ich, da rein starten, weil die Frage, die ich tatsächlich noch vorbereitet gehabt hätte vorher, was ist das Ziel gewesen beim Design, die haben wir jetzt schon direkt mit beantwortet. Und wir können jetzt direkt in die Spielerklärung starten. Die wird jetzt komplett auf Englisch sein. Die werden wir jetzt auch nicht ständig unterbrechen, um das kurz zu übersetzen. Dazu wird es von Ben sicherlich einfach noch was komplett auf Deutsch dann später dazu geben. So, I just translated most of it. I hope it was everything was correct. Ben was my check for that. And we can start right away with the explanation how the game works and where the similarities and differences to the original game are.
Sure. So I have this laid out on Tabletop Simulator. So a lot of the images you're going to see here are prototype images, and obviously you're not going to get a feel for the dual layer player boards on Tabletop Simulator or the quality of the cubes, etc. So, but yeah, so this is Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So the big crux of playing the game here is that you're going to use the various phase cards in order to play phases in the game that everyone is going to play at the same time, and everyone is going to choose which phase they want to play at the same time. So everybody has a hand of phase cards. Let me zoom in on these. Okay, so the phases are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as shown in the upper left hand corner, and this just tells you in what order the phases are resolved. So the first phase is the development phase. During this phase, everybody is going to be able to play a green project card, and I'm going to hopefully draw a green one right off the bat here. That was fortunate. So this is a green project card. You can tell the colors of the cards based on the upper left. Maybe I should shuffle these a little more. All green, apparently. There's a blue one.
Blue one?
Yes. But yeah, you can tell the color of the project cards. There are also red cards. They're in here somewhere, I promise. Here we go.
Well, there are more green cards than red cards, so...
Yeah.
Yes, there are a lot more. The deck is about half green cards. So the green cards in this game will give you production. So predominantly, that's kind of how it is in Terraforming Mars. There are some exceptions to that. But generally, or always in Ares Expedition, the green cards are going to give you production, which will be tracked on your player board here. And the blue cards will give you effects or abilities. This one gives you an effect, and then the red cards will just have things that happen instantaneously. And whenever you see that that lightning bolt icon there, that means that this happens immediately when you play the card. A lot of these cards are going to look very familiar to you if you play Terraforming Mars or you've played a lot of Terraforming Mars. I think it's around 150 of the 208 cards have names that are Terraforming Mars names, and their effects have been either like kind of directly transitioned or pretty similar. Some of the costs have changed because some of the effects of things have changed, but generally the kind of theme of the card comes through. So back to the phases. Whichever phases are played, the top of the ability section here is what's going to be resolved by everyone. And then the bottom, the bonus here, is whoever chose that phase will get to do the bonus. So in the case of the development phase, each player is going to play a green card. And if you chose this phase, you'll pay 3 MC less for that card. So just like in Terraforming Mars, the cost is in the upper left-hand corner, and it's paid in mega credits. The only difference really here is that in Ares Expedition, every card in your hand, every project card in your hand, you can discard to gain 3 mega credits. So if you're all out of mega credit cubes and you want to pay a card that costs 9, you can still just discard 3 cards to get your
So
cards back.
multi-use cards.
Yeah, multi-use cards. And you never have to pay to put cards into your hand like you do in Terraforming Mars, where you're presented with a bunch of options, then you have to pay for whichever ones you want to keep. So back to the phases. Second phase, phase 2, is construction. So in this one, you'll either get to play a blue card or a red card. If you chose this one, then you'll either get to draw a card or play an additional blue or red card this phase. So this will give you the opportunity to play multiple cards in a phase, if you have, obviously, the mega credits to pay for them. The third phase is the action phase, and this is where you can use all of your action effects and standard actions. So this is an effect. Let's see if we can find a card with an action real quick. Here's one. Of course, it's got to come out upside down. So this one is spend one MC to draw a card. So if you chose this, you'll get to do it an additional time if you chose this phase. So that means, you could pay 2 MC to draw 2 cards. Also, like it says here, you can activate your standard actions. The standard actions are printed at the bottom of your player board here. These are pretty similar to the standard projects in Terraforming Mars, where you can pay 20 MC to get a forest and bump the oxygen. You can pay 14 MC to bump the heat. You can pay 8 plants to get a forest tile and bump an oxygen. You can pay 8 heat to bump the temp. You can pay 15 to flip an ocean. So let's talk about the terraforming metrics real quick. We'll take a brief sidebar away from the phase description. But so if you look at the board here, yes, it's Terraforming Mars, the card game, and it has a board. But the board is really just here to track the different metrics in the game. So it'll track your score along the outside. It'll track what the temperature is along the inside, or on the left track, and what the oxygen is on the right track. You'll notice a big difference here from Terraforming Mars is that the sections of the map are different colors. Sorry, the sections of the gauges are different colors. This is because instead of in Terraforming Mars, where you'll have it must be negative 18 or warmer to play, you'll have a card like this that says it requires yellow temperature or warmer. And you'll see the requirement in the upper left hand has yellow and white temperature bar. So that means that this cube would have to be in here somewhere in order to play this card. So this just made it like a little bit easier to understand, and you don't have to reference the board so closely. You don't have to look and see what number it's actually on. You can just like look and see if it's in the color band or how many steps away from that color band it is before you can play it. So that's how those tracks work. Just like in Terraforming Mars, whenever you increase one of these, you're going to gain a TR. So the oceans work a little differently here because you'll notice there's only 9 spots on the board, and you'll see the little ocean icon on them. So the way the oceans work, instead of placing them on the board, they're laid out like this upside down, and the action is called flipping an ocean tile. So you will flip it over, you'll get the TR for flipping an ocean, and then you'll get the reward shown here on the bottom. Well, that's a weird way of looking at it, which here is 1 plant and $1. The game, as I said, is simultaneous action selection and then simultaneous resolution. So in the first 2 phases, everybody just plays a green card whenever they're ready, and then everybody will play a blue card or a red card if they want. When you get to the action phase, that's when you're going to start cashing in your plants and your heat and stuff and moving these things. Possibly you have effects that flip oceans, or you want to pay to flip oceans. So one of the common questions we run into is if it's simultaneous action selection, and let's say the temperature gauge is here and we both have plenty of heat to bump it, what happens? Well, someone will bump it and get the TR, and then everyone else that increases the temperature this phase still gets a TR. So if you're left with 16 heat, you're still going to gain 2 TR because you bumped the heat twice. Similarly, when you get down to flipping, let's say the last ocean here, if I flip this one over, I'll say, oh, all the oceans are flipped this phase. And then if you want to flip an ocean, you're going to get the reward shown on the last one that was flipped. So that there's no necessary turn order. You all just share that. You all get that same reward for it in that last one. So that's how the action phase works. And that's kind of an overview of the different metrics.
How many actions can you do in the action phase? Just 1? So
in the action phase, you can activate all of your action effects once.
Oh, okay.
So all of your cards that say action on them, you can do it once. If you chose it, you can do it a second time.
Okay.
And you can do as many standard actions as you want. So these actions printed along the bottom here, you can do those as many times as you want. I will say, though, it's important to note that if you have 8 plants or if you have 8 heat, you have to spend them to bump the terraforming metrics. You can't just store them up. This was kind of implemented so that people would move the game along, but also some of the animal cards, the animals that are like, hey, it's got to have this much heat or this much oxygen in order to play it. And then every time you bump heat, it'll increase it. We didn't want you to be able to save up all this heat, play your animal card, and then bump it. The animals became a little too high scoring the way that we had done them because of that. So this helps move the game along as well as control some of the high side of those point cards. So the 4th phase is production. So this is where you'll gain heat, plants, and draw cards according to your production. So another slight difference here from Terraforming Mars. You'll notice in that blue section, the second one down on the left here, this is card production. There are cards that will give you this production. You just draw cards during your turn. So it's effectively better than having 3 MC production, because you can always discard the card to get 3 MC, but you also might want to play it for some sort of value. So it's priced a little higher than 3 MC production when you're getting it, but it also provides a second way for you to draw more cards into the game. Also, you'll gain MC equal to your TR. So just like in Terraforming Mars, your terraforming rating will earn you money. A difference here is that you start on 5 TR instead of 20 in Terraforming Mars. The economy is a little different. Plus, you're probably going to end up with more production phases in this than you are generations in Terraforming Mars. Also, if you chose this phase, you get a bonus of 4 MC. So you'll collect 4 extra mega credits if you chose production.
So there is no production if nobody selects the 4 card.
Correct. And going back to the player board for a second here, you're familiar with the MC production. I just explained the card production. This is going top down. The heat production works just like heat production, and plant production works just like plant production in Terraforming Mars. The bottom 2 you'll see here, steel and titanium production. You'll notice that there are not wells to contain cubes for those resources anymore. They don't produce those anymore. What they do is, for each steel you have, it reduces the cost of building cards by 2. So cards with the building tags. And for each titanium you have, it reduces the cost of titanium or of space cards by 3. So these cards can be better if you end up playing, the equivalent of more than 1 space card in what would kind of be boiled down to a generation. But it's really hard because the game's mechanics are a lot different from Terraforming Mars in that you play a round and you'll only play certain phases in a round, because if you don't select the phases, they don't get played. So it's really not a one-to-one comparison between generations and rounds from Terraforming Mars to Ares Expedition.
Hey, it's a bit like San Juan, Puerto Rico, Terra here, Race for the Galaxy,
right?
That way.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Race for the Galaxy, a huge fan of Terraforming Mars, and this was kind of one of the first ideas that we came up with was, hey, what if we tried to we implement the phase system into Terraforming Mars to get you to kind of get the simultaneous play to cut down on the playtime from Terraforming Mars, but also we wanted to make sure that you felt like you were playing Terraforming Mars. Like the engine that you're building in this game, to me, is just as satisfying as the one that you build in Terraforming Mars, and you do it over the span of, we say, half the time of Terraforming Mars. For me, for the designers, it's more like a quarter to a third of the time. But for the playtesters, they were clocking in at the open playtesters were clocking in at half the time or less, typically. The 5th and final phase is the research phase. In this phase, all players will draw 2 cards and keep 1. If you chose this phase, you'll draw 5 cards and keep 2. So this is a way that you get more cards into the game. In addition to a lot of the actions will draw you cards. Of course, if you choose the construction phase, you can draw a card there. You could have a card draw production. So there's kind of a lot of ways to get new cards into the game, which is a little different from Terraforming Mars in that most of the cards are injected in the beginning phase of each round, where you draft the 4 cards that everybody drew. So while you end up playing often fewer cards in this game than you do in Terraforming Mars, I feel like you see just about the same amount of cards. So, and the fact that you don't have to pay for them up front leads you to have a lot wider range of options. So if you're given 10 cards at the beginning of the game and you have to choose which ones you want to keep right off the bat, it kind of narrows your options than if I deal you 8, which you will get dealt 8 at the beginning of Ares Expedition.
But there's no draft implemented.
There is no draft implemented. In order to, I know that people love to draft, and this comment has come up several times. There is no reason that you couldn't draft your opening hand. We didn't do it. What we did was implement a rule that once you have seen your 8 opening cards and your 2 corporations, you can discard any amount of your project cards and draw that many. So you kind of get like a mulligan to try and find cards that go better with your corporation. It's just a little bit faster than drafting, but there's no reason you couldn't draft your opening hand. But it gets really messy if you try to implement drafting into the research phase, because people are drawing different amount of cards, and most people are only drawing 2 cards. So drafting 2 cards is barely really drafting. You're just kind of picking from 2 and passing 1 to the left or the right. So yeah, it was something, and it's not, of all the playtesters that we sent the game to and had them play, nobody brought up that they were missing the drafting. We tried to basically address the issue, I think, with Terraforming Mars, that you don't see enough different cards if you don't draft, by giving you all these other ways to see cards.
And you draft a bit with yourself, because I think you need often to pay with the cards, and you don't want to give away a card.
Right. Yeah, this game has, I think during the game you have a lot of micro decisions to make, where you have a hand of like 8 cards or 9 cards, and you're like, I need to discard 3 of these because I really want to play this card, and you're really trying to figure out what cards you're not going to use. And sometimes it's clear cut, and sometimes it's really not. Sometimes you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this, so maybe I'll wait another turn. I'll choose a production phase here. I don't get the production of the card that I wanted to play, but now I don't have to discard the cards that I would have had to discard had I played the card earlier. So you have a lot of give and take there as to when you want to play the cards, and what you're willing to forego in order to do so.
Maybe we can just translate a bit.
Sure.
Soll ich jetzt gerne was zusammenfassen, ein bisschen? Genau, also, das wird ein Stückchen. Also das Spiel funktioniert eben vor allen Dingen darüber, das verkürzt vor allen Dingen seine Spielzeit im Vergleich zum normalen Terraforming Mars auf ungefähr die Hälfte. Bei den Spieletestern als Entwickler ist es nochmal ein bisschen weniger, aber generell
Spieletest, nur 2 Stunden.
Genau, auf die Hälfte, was eben vor allen Dingen auch daraus rührt, dass das jetzt ein simultanes Spiel ist. Also man erledigt seine Züge immer gleichzeitig. Die Mechaniken sind alle darauf ausgerichtet, das möglich zu machen. Selbst so Punkte wie, es gibt nur noch einen Temperaturschritt, der zu gehen ist. Was passiert, wenn dann mehrere Leute gleichzeitig die Temperatur erhöhen können oder wollen? Dann bekommt einfach jeder die entsprechende Belohnung, in dem Fall halt einen Schritt auf der Terraformleiste. Bei Ozeanen zum Beispiel ist es dann so, dass alle die Belohnung des zuletzt gedrehten Ozeanfeldes bekommen, um zu vermeiden, dass es da irgendwelche Probleme bekommt. Der Hauptmechanismus des Spiels, der sich am stärksten unterscheidet von Terraforming Mars, ist eben diese, ich nenne es mal Action Selection, also die Auswahl, welche Phase man gerne durchführen möchte. Davon gibt es 5 Stück. Es ist einmal eben Entwicklung, da spielt man die Grünkarten aus, also Gebäudekarten mit dauerhaften Effekten, dauerhaften passiven Effekten. Oder die zweite Phase ist dann das Ausspielen von roten oder blauen Karten. Die blauen Karten haben halt die Aktionen, die nochmal in einer weiteren Phase aktiviert werden können. Und die roten Karten sind Einmaleffekte, die sofort eintreten und dann nicht nochmal relevant sind. Die Karten bleiben aber im Spiel, meine ich, für die Symbole tatsächlich. Das muss man gleich nochmal fragen. Dann gibt es die Phase, ich weiß nicht mehr genau, was der Name war für die blaue. Could we zoom in a bit on the phases? On the phase cards? Thank you. It's called Action. Ja, gibt's die dritte Phase ist halt die Aktionsphase. Dann kann man alle seine blauen bisher ausgespielten Karten aktivieren, so man die Bedingungen dafür erfüllt. Da sind auch wieder genauso Karten dabei, wo das zum Beispiel Geld kostet. Das muss man in dem Moment haben. In Phase 4 ist es so, dass alles, was man an passiver Produktion hatte, eben ausgelöst wird. Das heißt, man produziert nicht jede Runde automatisch Geld, Stahl, Pflanzen, was auch immer.
Genau,
sondern
wenn keiner 4 spielt, dann gibt es kein Einkommen.
Wenn keiner das spielt, dann passiert das nicht. Und in der letzten Phase, das ersetzt sozusagen das Kartenziehen zu Beginn jeder Generation. Im alten Terraforming Mars zieht jeder 2 Karten und darf sich dann eine aussuchen, die er behält. Besonderheit, derjenige, der eine solche Karte spielt, bekommt noch einen Bonus. Zum Beispiel in der Produktionsphase bekommt er 4 Geld extra oder er darf 3 extra Karten ziehen in der Forschungsphase und darf insgesamt 2 Karten behalten. Solche Boni sind bei allen Karten vorhanden. Und die Besonderheit, jetzt muss ich mal kurz meinen eigenen Faden wiederfinden. Besonderheit ist eben, dass nicht jede Phase in jedem Zug auftritt und das dann auch dazu gehört, sich wahrscheinlich zu überlegen, was könnte eventuell mein Mitspieler ausspielen.
Do we select the phases all simultaneously or when it's my turn?
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
It's all simultaneous.
Ah, okay.
Also alles findet simultan statt, auch die Auswahl dieser Phasen. Das heißt, man weiß nicht genau, was die anderen machen. Eine Besonderheit im Spiel ist auch noch, dass es gibt halt keinen Draft und der wird auch schwierig einzubauen sein. Die Karten, die man auf der Hand hat, kann man aber zu jedem Zeitpunkt, nicht nur irgendwie in der Produktionsphase, so zu jedem Zeitpunkt abwerfen für 3 Geld, um dann eben doch noch in der entsprechenden Phase zum Beispiel eine andere Karte ausspielen zu können. Das heißt, Karten sind nicht nur zum Ausspielen da, sondern auch eine Form von Währung, die halt Geld darstellen.
Genau, das heißt, man draftet ja auch so ein bisschen mit sich selbst, weil ich habe natürlich oft nur Karten auf Hand, die ich auch spielen will, aber ich muss wahrscheinlich auch, wie bei Race for the Galaxy oder so auch, wenn man das mal gespielt hat, die Karten auch abgeben zu bezahlen. Das sind auch immer dann, das ersetzt die Entscheidung beim Draft schon sehr gut, wie ich finde. Also genau. Zumindest in Race macht es das.
Genau. Und habe ich alles soweit? Genau, also das Spielerboard, ja, es ist ein Kartenspiel und ja, es hat ein Brett. Das ist eben dazu da, um diese ganzen Sachen zu tracken. Es hat sehr viel weniger Interaktion mit dem Kartenanteil, der hier viel stärker der Fokus ist, als im Original Terraforming Mars. Ich füge jetzt mal eine Kleinigkeit hinzu. Soweit ich informiert bin, gab es eben durchaus zu Beginn des Entwicklungsprozesses, dass das komplett nur mit Karten funktioniert hat, aber man festgestellt hat, dass es dann den neueren Spielern schwieriger fällt, eben im Blick zu behalten, wo steht der Temperaturmarker und so weiter, weil man das dann über Markersammeln gemacht hat. I just added a little bit that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that you, in the beginning, your design where you only had cards and managed the different tracks like temperature and oxygen with tokens or something similar. And while it was a good way to play, you found out that newer players, it was difficult for newer players to track how far the oxygen level, etc. was. And so you decided to add a small board back in for better playability.
Yeah, that's pretty true. Yeah, imagine having to track all of these things via tokens. It would be much messier and harder to do. So we added the board in, and again, it's pretty small. I think for comparison, this might be roughly the same size between the, but it's the board is kind of roughly the same size as the player mats, and the player mats are roughly the same size as they are in Terraforming Mars. So it's nowhere near the board that it is in Terraforming Mars.
So it should be easier to also take it with you as soon as we are able to travel again, wherever we are. I have some very through the explanation of the game on the whole, or were some things left?
I did skip over a couple of parts, or I missed a couple of parts. So basically, the turn breakdown is you start with choosing what action or what phase you want to play for the round. So you'll have all 5 of your phase cards in hand to start the game. And so let's go ahead and draw. See if I can draw these elegantly. Whoop. Oh, I don't think I'm sitting down yet. Here we go. Whoop. Okay. Okay, so all the phase cards are in my hand. I'll choose one of these, I'll flip it upside down, and I'll set it out here. Once everyone has done that, you flip it over, and you show that, and then you'll flip over the tiles up here to show which phases people chose, so that everyone at the table can see. This was another thing that we didn't use that much as designers, because we can look around the table, but it's good for bookkeeping, especially when you're playing 4 players, to see what people have done or what phases you're playing. And then once you've played all the phases, so the second step of the round is to resolve all the phases that you chose. The third step of the round is mostly a cleanup step where you'll flip over all of these. There is a maximum hand size of 10. So if you have more than 10 cards in your hand, you have to discard down to 10, but you'll get $3, 3 MC for every card you discard. Because you'll always get that. And you can discard a card whenever you want for the MC. So it's not just for paying for cards. It can also be for paying for activations on abilities, etc. But then on the next turn, you leave out, you're not allowed to pick the same phase twice, two rounds in a row. So you'll leave out the phase card you had from before. You'll choose which phase you want next. and then you'll put them, and the rule book says to overlap them like this. Not that elegant on TTS, but so then once everyone has done this, you will flip and then show these, and then return the one that you played last time to your hand. So it's different from Race for the Galaxy in that in Race you can just choose the same phase over and over again, and this one you have to at least rotate between a couple of different phases. It also allows you to kind of predict what phases your opponents are going to play easier, because that at its core is the player interaction in this, because we took out all the cards that negatively impact your opponents. So there's no card that like makes you lose a bunch of plants. A lot of times we found in like when I would play Terraforming Mars, that those cards that provide that negative player interaction, they didn't target the person who was winning. They just target the person that they could target, right? And not always is the person that's winning the person that has 6 plants for you to blow up or 1 energy production for you to steal. So it was aggravating those games where you were like, I'm losing, I just got my energy production, and now you stole it when you should be targeting this other player. So we kind of took that stuff out, and that was part of changing the cards from Terraforming Mars into Ares Expedition. The other thing that I didn't touch on was we talked about how you can get forest tiles here. They're not really tiles, they're forest VP in this game. So you just have a little VP token for the forest. So at the end of the game, these will each be worth a point. So whenever you do build a forest, you end up getting a TR for bumping the oxygen, which is a victory point, obviously, and then a victory point chip here.
I have one question. What happens if 2 players chose the same action select card? So if I have 2 research, for example.
Right. So everyone will resolve the research phase, and both players that chose the research phase will get the bonus.
So, okay. So it's not doubled. The upper space on one of the cards is wasted, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Good. And
vielleicht noch mal kurz für die Leute, die es nicht verstanden haben. Bei dem Spiel ist es so, nicht wie bei Race for the Galaxy, wo ich jede Runde wieder die gleiche Phase nehmen kann, sondern hier, wenn ich einmal Produktion gespielt habe, bleibt die Karte liegen. Ich muss aus den anderen Karten eine aussuchen, nehme danach die Produktionskarte wieder auf die Hand, sodass ich halt nicht immer das Gleiche machen kann und auch ein bisschen vorausplanen kann, was machen die anderen Spieler.
Weil sie nur 4 zur Auswahl immer jeweils haben. Genau. Wenn die 2 Spieler die gleiche Karte ausspielen, dann profitieren sie beide von dem Bonus. Die obere, also die Hauptaktion sozusagen, wird aber für diese Runde trotzdem nur einmal ausgelöst. Es ist dann also nicht so, dass man bei Forschen plötzlich 4 Karten jeder zieht und 2 davon behält. I've got 2 more questions, rules related. The first thing is, how is the solo mode working in the card version?
So the solo mode, what happens here? So in the normal game, everyone starts off at 5. So what you'll do is your cube will start at 5, and then you'll take a cube to track the rounds, basically. So you put that on 1. You'll shuffle these phase cards, and then you'll pick your phase card, and then you'll flip over this one. So these are the 2 phases you'll resolve. And then you'll go and you'll pick your next phase card, and then the dummy will just flip the next one over. So in that case, you doubled up, so you'd only play 1 phase. And then you'll play through the whole hand here. And then once you've done that, you'll shuffle these up to form the deck again. You'll advance this, and you'll go through it again. And on the solo mode has beginner, novice, and expert modes. And on the beginner mode, you'll pick a metric, either temperature or oxygen, and bump it twice whenever this reshuffles. So it'll act like he is terraforming. On the intermediate mode, you just bump it once, and on expert mode, you don't bump it at all. And what you do is every time, so basically every 5 turns, you're going to move this thing up, reshuffle these. You're going to play a total of 25 turns. So once this moves to 5, this is your last way through the deck. But on this one, you get to pick the order that the phases come out. So you can plan accordingly and kind of maximize how you want the phases to resolve. And your goal is to get all of Mars terraformed by the end of those 25 turns.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And the last question regarding different play modes is, I heard that there is a 2-player co-op mode also in the rules.
Yes. There's a two-player co-op mode. It is played similarly to the solo mode, except for there is no dummy player, but it is a race in the same way. But the way that you track turns is you're going to seed a bunch of copper cubes. Those are the gold cubes, even though it's hard to tell. You're going to seed a bunch of copper cubes onto the board, just in the corner here. And then you're going to put some of the other player turn order. I believe that it is 4 of the other player ones, and then 26 of the copper cubes. And what happens is you're allowed to fully communicate what you're doing. You're not supposed to talk about like specific cards, but you can say, I'm going to build cards that produce a lot of heat. Maybe you should produce a lot of plants. And then that way you can kind of coordinate what you're both specializing at or doing better at so that you can bump all the metrics. But the cubes here act as the timer. So whenever you reveal what phase you're playing, you'll grab a copper cube and add it to your resource. So you're getting a little extra dollar every round. The player cubes here, though, what they do is they allow you to trade a card. So I can take a player cube instead of a copper cube. I just return it kind of to the box. And then I can trade one of the project cards in my hand to my teammate, and they would trade me one of their cards too. So if, for example, I'm like specializing in titanium and you want event cards because you have cards that trigger off event cards, and I draw a good event card and you draw a good space card, we can take that player cube and swap so that we're playing the cards that are good for our strategies. So it allows for more planning and more kind of communication. But basically you play through 15 turns, and then you have to fully terraform the whole planet. And then I believe that you have to score a total of 80 points between the two of you. So some of the VP cards become more important. In solo, like the VP cards are just for you to kind of set your high score, but they actually they are a requirement in order to win the 2-player game.
Okay. We'll just do a short translation. Also es wird auch noch einen Solo-Modus geben. Es gibt, in dem dann ein Dummy-Spieler dabei ist, der einen zweiten Beteiligten simuliert, aber nicht vollständig. Der baut keine Karten oder ähnliches, aber zusätzlich zu der eigenen Phase.
Der Timer quasi.
Genau, und auch zusätzliche Aktionen. Genau, also zusätzlich zu der eigenen Phase, die man ausgewählt hat, wird eine von einem Deck eines nicht existenten Mitspielers aufgedeckt. Und diese beiden Phasen werden durchgeführt. Im Gegensatz zum normalen Spiel ist es aber auch, zu einem normalen Mitspieler ist es hier aber so, dass immer weiter diese Karten aufgedeckt werden, bis alle 5 da waren. Das heißt, die Berechenbarkeit nimmt immer weiter zu, welche zusätzlichen Aktionen zu deinen eigenen auftreten, bis man es bei der letzten im Vorfeld weiß. Das Ganze passiert insgesamt 5-mal, also man hat 25 Züge. Danach muss man es geschafft haben, alle Werte aufs Maximum getrieben zu haben, oder man hat verloren. Es gibt verschiedene Schwierigkeitsgrade, die letzten Endes aber nur beeinflussen, jedes Mal, wenn man durch das Aktionsdeck des Dummy-Spielers durch ist, um wie viel sich die Werte erhöhen. Einmal um 2 oder um 1 oder gar nicht auf der schwierigsten Variante. Noch eine kleine Besonderheit: In der allerletzten Runde liegen die Aktionskarten des Dummy-Spielers offen und man kann frei auswählen, mit welcher man das kombinieren möchte, um zu optimieren, um den letzten Funken rauszuquetschen und das Ganze zu schaffen. Außerdem enthält das Spiel einen Koop-Modus für 2 Personen, in dem es sich auch um ein Rennen handelt. Man hat in diesem Fall 15 Züge Zeit, in dem extra Ressourcen auf dem Brett platziert werden, die man sich entweder dann jedes Mal, wenn man mit einer Aktion, glaube ich, durch ist, als ein Geld zu sich nehmen kann, oder man kann etwas zur Seite legen und kann miteinander jeweils eine Karte tauschen, denn man hat ja vielleicht, der eine ist spezialisiert zum Beispiel auf Titanproduktion, kann Weltraumkarten sehr gut spielen, der andere kann Ereigniskarten sehr gut spielen, also die roten. Und ich ziehe die gute Ereigniskarte, er zieht die gute Weltraumkarte, dann können wir das tauschen. Wir dürfen nicht exakt über unsere Karten reden, wenn ich das richtig verstanden habe, sondern nur, was wir beabsichtigen zu tun. Also ich habe natürlich gleich an Gloomhaven ein bisschen gedacht. Also ein bisschen limitierte Kommunikation, um auch zu verhindern, dass einer der beiden für den anderen mitspielt. Aber genau, also in einer begrenzten Zeit, also nochmal 10 Züge weniger als alleine, um alle Werte aufs Maximum zu bringen, um den Mars zu terraformen, und man muss, vermutlich waren es 80 Siegpunkte mindestens erreichen. Das heißt, auch die Siegpunktekarten sind hier wichtig fürs Ausspielen, damit man gemeinsam diesen Wert dann zusammengerechnet erreicht. Genau. Gut. So.
Are there any expansions already planned?
So we have some ideas for some expansions. I think a lot of it, and this is kind of what I've learned from making Aeon's End and other games that have lots of expansions, is when you make the game and you put it on Kickstarter, you can see what people really like about it and what they don't like about it from looking at it and watching review videos. But you really need to see people play the game and get their feedback on actually playing the game to see what people want from an expansion. So we haven't gone down the road of like fully designing an expansion yet, but we've heard what people are saying, and some of it you can tell like they just haven't played the game so they don't know, and some of it is, oh, that's a good idea, maybe we could implement that in some way going forward. So I would say, based on the success of the Kickstarter so far, that there will most likely be expansions, but what they are right now, I'm not really sure. We have some ideas, but I'd like to see what the public thinks and where they would like to see improvements. So.
Und wo wir gerade beim Kickstarter sind, ich habe das natürlich im Vorfeld recherchiert. Der Kickstarter läuft übrigens noch bis zum 5. März. 5th of March is the last day of the Kickstarter, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah. Also für alle, die sich das da nochmal genauer angucken wollen, bis zum 5. März hat man da Zeit. Das heißt, es ist jetzt nicht so, dass das hier kurz vor Ende steht. I've got one little rules-related question here left. The red cards in the original game, you played them and then they came face down to the side, so their icons wouldn't count against whatever other effects were in play. Except for in the end game scoring the victory points on them. The red cards in this game stay in play face up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Every card you play, you'll always get to count their tags. Everything is played face up.
The player boards are double layered or just the same like in the base game?
They're dual layer.
That's a good upgrade.
Thank God.
Yeah, that's one of those that like you learn that mistake shortly after, or just like, we weren't going to make these single layers, so
Gut. Haben wir irgendwelche Fragen?
Das waren die Fragen.
Das waren soweit die Fragen, genau. Very good.
Die deutsche Version, German Edition?
Exactly. German Edition, I believe, is the publishing partners of the OG Terraforming Mars are the same for this one?
You know what? I believe that's true, but I can't answer for you definitively because I don't handle the foreign language rights part of the stuff. But we're trying to keep those in line. That the publishers for the various languages for Terraforming Mars would be the same publishers for Ares Expedition.
So I guess there is also no definitive timeline for foreign language editions at this point in time.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. It is not. I'll switch to German for this one. Das Spiel, also wann genau die deutsche Version erscheint, können wir an der Stelle noch nicht sagen. Wir können auch noch nicht 100% sagen, dass es auch bei Schwerkraft erscheinen wird. Es ist aber wahrscheinlich, es ist auf jeden Fall auch das Ziel, dass das dementsprechend geschieht, aber allerdings ist er jetzt als Designer an der Stelle in dem Prozess, was die Lizenzen angeht, nicht so konkret involviert, dass er das jetzt mit abschließender Sicherheit sagen kann. Und was ich noch hinzufügen möchte, das Spiel ist relativ sprachneutral im Sinne von, dass alles auch als Ikonografie vorhanden ist, aber die Karten haben natürlich Text drauf, insofern kann man nicht von einem sprachneutralen Spiel reden. Ja, Ben.
Ich gucke, ob es hier auf Kickstarter schon was gibt zur deutschen Version, aber da seid ihr als Zuschauer wahrscheinlich auch schon deutlich besser.
Das reichen wir
noch nach.
Genau. So, I think we covered most of it. If you don't have any questions left.
Do we have covered most of it? I have just one question. Are there any milestones or achievements?
Not in this version, no. But that is something that we've heard people's requests for and could definitely be involved in an expansion.
Yeah, you could call it Hellas and Elysium. Yeah. Well,
is it playable on Tabletop Simulator for the public or just for playtesting?
Just for playtesting. Yeah, it's not available to the public.
Okay.
What is the estimated time frame between the finish of the Kickstarter and you trying to get the game out to the backers?
So the Kickstarter says that we should be delivering in September. I see no reason why that wouldn't hit. I think we might be a little bit sooner than that, but I think September is probably a reasonable expectation.
So it would be on time for Essen.
Yeah,
very good.
Can happen this year. There will be Neoprene Playmats.
There are Neoprene player mats offered as part of the Kickstarter. They're just like a lot of play mats. They're not really like necessary, but they are like kind of a visually pleasing upgrade. They allow you to, they give you spots to hold your various cards. But yeah, they're part of the Kickstarter. They aren't dual layered because you just put the cards down. You set the player board on top of the Neoprene player mat, and then it lays out where you should put your project cards as you play them and your phase cards as you play them.
So it is dual layered for the question here. It is dual layered in the sense that the normal player board comes on top of the Neoprene board.
Sure.
Das kannst du einfach über den Kickstarter beantworten, ne?
Genau.
So there was a question about the price tag, but we already put that in chat because we can read Kickstarter and give that info ourselves. We don't need to ask you that. I think I got everything on my notes.
Yeah, I just asked the audience if they have any questions, but I think we answered the most questions already. Is there any other questions left? Now's the time. Also falls ihr jetzt noch Fragen habt, jetzt die Zeit, haut noch raus.
Genau.
Noch haben wir Nick da, können wir noch ein, zwei Fragen beantworten. Das meiste findet man aber tatsächlich auf der Kickstarter-Seite, die ist ganz gut. Sagt zur deutschen Version, die wird es wahrscheinlich bei Schwerkraft geben. Frage ist, wann auch immer. Preis sind so $39. Mal gucken, was dann bei Schwerkraft kostet.
Genau.
Sollte ja auch so um die 40 € kosten.
Auslieferung.
September, also zur Spiel wird es wahrscheinlich da sein. Er hat auch gerade gesagt, er sieht keinen Grund, warum es nicht im September da sein sollte, weil das Spiel an sich ist soweit fertig. Es sind halt ja größtenteils Karten, die gedruckt werden müssen, wobei da auch, wie ich gerade gehört habe, die Slots in den Fabriken immer voll sind, aber wir hoffen einfach mal das Beste.
I remembered one question. It's a Kickstarter. Why are there no miniatures? I don't know why. So no.
The Mars rover is landing today in 2 hours.
Exactly.
We just timed it that way.
Exactly. When we're finished here, people can switch right over to a NASA live stream or something, because at I think 3:55 Eastern Standard Time, the Mars rover Perseverance is supposed to land on the red planet. I mean, we definitely timed that on purpose. Zu dir. Verabschiedungsdank.
So, you've told us everything you wanted to tell us? Tell? Okay. And I think we are through. I say thank you for guiding us through the game. It was no playthrough, but I think, es war kein, wir haben es jetzt nicht durchgespielt. Also ich dachte, so eine Vorstellung ist wahrscheinlich besser. Vielleicht kommen wir noch mal dazu, so ein Playthrough zu machen, aber wir warten noch, bis September ist, und Fragen haben wir alle beantwortet. Daher würde ich sagen wir Danke an Nick. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Und das war's von uns. Wir sind dann weg. We just